Right. Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome to the session. We are in a Zoom this time, not a webinar. So, for all those that were there on Monday, we can turn our cameras on. All right. Let me start off with Jacqueline. Jacqueline, how we doing today?
Hi.
Hi, how you doing?
Great. Hopefully better now because we're going to learn from you. So
Yes. What exam did you take?
I'm sorry.
Which exam did you take?
Oh, I haven't yet, but since you're
Okay.
offering this, I'm
Oh,
any
nice.
any bit of guidance.
Love it. All right, so we're here early. I'm not mad. Okay, awesome. All right, let me go to Lewis. Lewis, how we doing, brother?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. Ready to go over today's essay workshop. We're gonna cover that con law essay for those that took the California bar. So even for the UBE, this is still gonna be con law, still another essay to learn the skills and whatnot. But that's the essay we're gonna be doing. But yeah, as we kind of do our rounds, how'd you feel about that con law essay, Lewis?
You know what? I felt that I had hit it out the park. I recognized that they had like some typos, but I felt that I hit it out the park. But I think that I overstretched my limitations, and I got so busy into it. I started talking about market participation, and I spent too much effort into counter arguments with it. When I look at it, I should have just stuck to the basics, and I think I would have did
Mm-hmm.
a lot better. I think that I was being too much of a litigator on that one, and I hurt
Got it.
myself. And that was my lowest essay on that one, so it sucked.
Okay, so I'm excited to talk about it. I mean, yeah, I heard a lot of, people struggling with this con law essay. And so far, after sitting down with it over the past hour and preparing for this session, I'm like, this essay really should have been a straightforward one. But before we get into it and we're going to learn from it, I do want to say, Lewis, and I want to say, to everybody, one thing that I'm hearing a trend of that we all want to be mindful of as we move forward in our preparation for whatever upcoming bar it is. I'm hearing this recurring theme of I thought I knocked it out of the park and I didn't. I thought I did really well on it and I did. I'm hearing that a lot from a lot of different students. And so I think it's important for us to figure out, how we can actually also be more aligned, because that is then where something is going off in the study period of, yeah, feeling as though we're on the right track with certain things when in fact we're not. But again, hopefully today's session, specifically going through the con law essay, can be the start of helping us with that. Let's go ahead. We got one more minute before we get started, letting some of our latecomers come into the room. So let me go to Edna. Edna, how are we doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. So, are you going to be taking it for your second time in February?
No, the first time.
Okay, so your first time as well. Okay, we got a lot of first time takers in here. I love it. Okay, good. So good. You're gonna come in here and learn some stuff. What jurisdiction are you taking?
California.
Perfect, perfect. Okay. Well, enjoy. All right. We're gonna be getting on our repeat takers. We're gonna be going through some mistakes that we made. So we get to learn from other people's mistakes and do all that stuff. So that'll be good for you as well. Awesome. All right. Let's go ahead and jump into it, everybody. So today we are doing our breaking down the bar essay workshop. Again, today we'll be breaking down the con law essay. Um, Essay writing for the bar exam is one of the skill sets that we must develop in order to pass the exam. There's a lot of things that go into being a good essay writer. I talk about this often. We'll see if we can take a volunteer. All right. The answer might be obvious, but before you even get to essay writing, what is the foundation that you must have in order to perform well on the essays? Right. Just to state the obvious, what must you have a foundation in before you can even perform well on the essays?
Spotting the issues.
Yeah, and that's almost essentially stating the obvious as far as like we got to understand the law. And to your point, Jacqueline, right? Knowing the law then allows us to accurately spot the issues. And everybody spotting the right issues is imperative. On the California bar exam, you have an hour. On the UBE bar exam, you have 30 minutes to write an essay. You do not have the time that you had in law school to talk about non-issues. So before we get into, organization, and you get into, are you using enough facts and when to use counter arguments and all those things, it's, do we simply know the law? Do we know how to trigger the right discussions, know what to talk about and what not? So for all those, right, remember that's step number one. Then you get into the skill proponent of essay writing. And, within Legally Fit, we have all of our systems and our formulas, but let's just do a refresher and a quick walkthrough of how an exam should go. You will get your essay and you read through your essay. All right. First step, as we're going to practice today in our walkthrough, you have to have really strong reading comprehension. That typically is a shortcoming for a lot of us, which is our first, issue that prevents us from doing the other things well. If we are missing facts, if we are confusing facts, adding facts, all of these things, that's going to throw off our ability to analyze the situation. And outside of making mistakes, as we'll see with this con law issue, sometimes reading comprehension is being able to actually condense and internalize what's going on in a way that you're almost making the problem that you're dealing with conversational and you truly understand it. So again, we'll see that in action. After you have this strong comprehension of the facts and you truly get a sense of what's going on, then that is where you have to create your outline, which contains the issues you think are worth a discussion. Again, we need that understanding of the law, right, to help us with extreme accuracy in that department. And yes, that's the next step. After you outline in our program, what we talk about as well is before you start writing, you want to know what type of exam you're dealing with. Is it a racehorse exam, which means I have to type really fast? Like I have freaking 7 to 10 issues to talk about. And so I have to make certain decisions in my time allotted to make sure I meet the needs of this type of exam. It might be what we call in-depth analysis, where instead of having 7 to 10 issues, maybe you only have 3 issues. Well, now I have to deploy a different strategy. Instead of being quick and doing less counter arguments, maybe now I do more and I have to really roll up my sleeves, right? So you have different types of essays and you figure that out. Those are all the steps you do before you start writing. Then you get into the actual writing, okay? And in the writing, this is now where not only do you need to know the law, be able to spot issues, but you have to be able to remember your rules. And yes, it's a challenge. We got 13 different subjects, all this law, and you have to, in that moment's notice, either remember your rule verbatim, or, which is why I always want everybody to be rooted in the understanding first, is that if you cannot remember the rote memorization, you can at least still put down some bit of a rule that encompasses everything, even though if it's not the exact wording. So you're doing one of two of getting down your rule, and then you're doing your analysis. So sometimes we don't remember the rule, sometimes we do, but then we get to the analysis. And here is where a lot of us might have some issues, which is, are we being detailed enough? Are we using the facts? Are we avoiding being conclusory? Are we knowing the right angle for how to discuss this, for how to attack this situation? Jacqueline, let me go back to you and ask you, where and how do you think one gets better at making sure they have a sufficient analysis, at making sure they know the right type of facts to use for a particular topic, right? And knowing the right angle. Ultimately, how do we get to that point of being masters in that department?
Doing practice hypos.
That's it, right? It's not complicated. It's doing practice and doing a lot of them. But Jacqueline, right, that's referring to the first part of it, which is the quantity, right, of your work of like, I have to do them and I have to do them a lot because I want to get coverage, right? If we're talking about con law, I want to see an essay on substantive due process and maybe multiple because it's heavily tested. I want to see multiple essays on equal protection. on dormant commerce clause, on commerce clause, on takings clause, on justiciability and standing, right? Like I'm just going down the laundry list of things, and you want to get familiarity with how those different things are typically analyzed, which goes back to the recurring theme, everybody, that bar prep really requires a level of commitment and immersion into what you're studying, because you have to internalize all that stuff, right? Like this is not something that you can simply do a practice question. Okay, look at it. Okay, cool. Moving on to the next. You have to internalize it in a way that you can truly apply it moving forward. Okay. So that's what it comes down to having better analysis. Some of it is core skills, but some of it is just doing enough practice, but doing it in a way where you're actually recalling the strategy you use, the type of facts you use to make it easier on yourself in this situation. And then from there, you make sure you use time management to finish your essay. That's really big. I know my students know that we preach that all the time, both essays and PTs. You have to finish. So that becomes a whole nother strategy, right? You could literally, know the law really well, spot all the issues, memorize all the rules, but you just didn't have proper time management. And so now you only analyzed 70% of the essay before it was time to move on. Well, now you have a, failing score, not because you weren't equipped, but just that last piece of time management. So essay performance overall really is this like culmination of all these things. And again, very demanding, but also very doable. Okay. So we're going to now jump into a essay. Again, we're going to jump into this con law essay for today. But do I have any questions that anybody has so far as we get started about, essays in general, or how to improve in essays, or anything that I've covered so far? Do I have any questions? And then also too, for all those new to Legally Fit, when you guys would like to speak, feel free to raise your digital hand, and then I can call on you, or you can, type your question in the chat as well. All right, looks like no questions. So let's go ahead and jump into our essay. I'm going to tell you now, I'm going to look for a volunteer. It could be a named volunteer or an anonymous one, to go over their con law submission. So anybody who took the California July exam and they have their essay for the con law question, you can either directly message it to me in Zoom, and then I'll know you want to stay anonymous, or you can just put it in the chat and I'll grab it. And then I know you don't mind us talking through it as well, and I can call you, by name as we discuss it. So either way, but I would love for us to, after we go through it, kind of see again how that correlates to the grades we receive and things like that. Okay. All right, let me get to the share screen. Is there a minimum word count for essays? Yes. You want to get around, give or take, around like 2,000 words is typically what I aim for. All right, share screen. Here we go. All right, sorry in advance for the, trauma trigger, going back into the belly of the beast, but it's good. We're here to learn, so it's going to be good. All right, Lewis, to get us started and focusing on the reading comprehension, I'm going to call on you a little bit to get us started. Let's go through this. The first thing that we want to do is skim the answer, or the call of the question. And so, we have the whole privileges or, we got the typo, but we got privileges or immunities of the 14th, privileged immunities of Article 4, as 3 and 4 here. And then below we got due process and equal protection. When you're thinking due process right here, how many forms of due process are there?
For me, it's two. It's procedural, meaning like if you have you're able to do the appeal, and Now I go blank, but it says I know it's two. So the appeal part and see this is trauma for me. Hold on, I put on my essay though because I don't mind sharing it. I know I wrote it. Let me
Yes.
see.
Substantive.
Oh, substantive due process and procedural due process.
Good. All right. So we got the two different types. Look, and you started off, for me, I got two different types. Hopefully all of us, we share those same two. We got procedural and we got substantive. Good. So I just want to mark that down. It doesn't specify which one. So at this stage, both are options. Now, everybody, first time reading this question, or at least, for the ones that it's new to, but right now, as we go through this, focus on reading comprehension, truly understanding what's going on. All right. For 20 years, the number of primary care physicians in state A has declined, adversely affecting the health of those living in low income and rural communities. Lewis, I need you to just immediately, first sentence, put that first off into your own words. What's going on? What are they setting the stage for?
They're setting up to do something for particular residents in a state because they're talking about state A decline. So I know immediately I'm looking at them discriminating against out-of-staters or something that's going to benefit this state. So I'm also looking to see if there's some type of economic gain for the state.
And so, Lewis, so what you're doing is jumping already into some potential issue spotting, where I just want reading comprehension first of just like, I want to make sure I'm just getting the picture. So my version in my own words of re-saying sentence number one here is something as simple as, okay, this has been 20 years. Basically, there has been a declining number of doctors in state A, and this is affecting the low income and rural areas more than it is the like urban or city or wealthy areas. So again, I got less doctors and it's negatively affecting low income and rural. So let me go ahead and do some highlighting. So primary care physicians declined in state A, and then it's adversely affecting health of those living in low income and rural communities. Now, this comes back to, as me and Jacqueline were talking about, right? Practice, knowing con law, knowing what you're looking for. So as soon as I know this is a con law essay, my antennas should be up for certain things. One of those things that in every con law essay, your antennas should be up for is the reason why the government is doing what they're doing, otherwise known as the government purpose. And so this already seems to be our government purpose. They're starting off with the problem that seemingly they're going to address, right? And literally it then says to address this. So boom, I'm going to go ahead and on the side label this as my government purpose. All right, from my repeat takers. Again, let's see how much of this we remember. And again, this is the type of stuff that we got to either for the first time or get back to having like ready and on call. When you're thinking about government purpose, where does that typically fall within your analysis of a con law essay? Where does that become relevant? Your government purpose.
When you're talking about the scrutinies?
Exactly. In your scrutiny test, you have to know what if the government interest was compelling, if it was important, if it was legitimate, et cetera. So yes, we always want to isolate this because chances are it's going to be important. All right. So all of that just in line number one. All right. So here we go. To address this problem, the state A legislature enacted a statute creating a physician retention program. All right. So whenever we're talking about there is a law being passed, we must identify and make sure we're very clear on who is passing that law. What are our two options there? Whenever you have a passing of a law, what are the two options? It's either being passed by. Exactly, Ashley. It's either being passed by the federal government, Congress, or it's being passed by state whichever one you're dealing with drastically changes the issues that you may raise and discuss. So you always want to identify that. So here you have state A legislature enacted a statute creating a physician retention program. So on my annotation, I have government purpose. I'm also going to put, we have our state A law coming up right here. And it's created a physician retention program. Okay, even by title, again, Lewis, what I'm doing is processing that. Okay, they're trying to keep physicians, right? They have a declining number. They're trying to do something to keep physicians, ideally inside the state. Okay, cool. And it says at each of its state's medical schools, at each of the state's medical schools. Now, here's we're going to get into the detail of the statute, which we know is going to ultimately be important. The statute authorizes both a tuition waiver, okay, so a tuition waiver, and an annual payment of $10,000 to state A residents who apply to and are admitted into the PRP. So let's pause there for a second. Again, Lewis, in our own words, just reading comprehension, no law. Let's just put that in our own words so we're processing it. What's going on here?
So those that apply for the program, they're going to get it's an incentive base. So they're going to get their tuition waived, and then they're also going to get some money.
Okay. And again, this is where I also, encourage everybody to have fun with these fact patterns. Make sure you're like really giving into it of what's going on. And so, Lewis, the way I'm saying it to myself too is like, okay, so wow, this program allows you to go to school for free. And not only do you get to go to school for free, but also what?
You get $10,000, get some money.
They're paying you to go to school, right? So even that, you want to really kind of feel the significance of, right? So wow, free school and you're going to actually get paid. Okay, fair enough. It says in exchange, the participant, so it's not going to be for free, right? The participant agrees to work in a targeted low income or rural community. Okay, so in your head, you're like, okay, seemingly makes sense. They have an issue that it's adversely affecting the health of those in low income and rural. So now they're trying to say you have to work in one of those areas for the first 5 years after graduation. So, all right, got to be there for 5 years, just processing it. Like, seems like a little bit of a long time, but hey, you're getting free school and getting paid. PRP participants who do not keep their full 5-year commitment are required to repay the state for their waived tuition or PRP payments based on the number of months actually worked in the low income and rural communities. That's a nice long sentence that can just simply be summarized as if you are working for some period of time, but not the full 5 years, and you stop, you have to pay back some amount depending on how long you've been there. So yeah, you don't get all those incentives. The only way you get all the incentives is if you stay there the full 5 years. So we're just going to put participants who do not keep their full 5-year commitment and then just put repay. All right. The statute does not authorize these incentives. Let's pause there for a second. Lewis, so far, is everything feeling kind of comprehended and pretty straightforward?
Yes.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, and feel free again. I appreciate you volunteering and being vulnerable and sharing how you went through this with the group. Did you feel as though, like, on the day, under the lights, under the pressure, that you were feeling as comfortable with the facts? Because a lot of times we're moving too fast and we don't get that. But just out of curiosity, are you already seeing a difference in how the facts are kind of clicking, or no? Did you already have strong reading comprehension?
I felt that I had strong reading comprehension because the very first sentence that you read, immediately when it separated and it says state A, and then you look at the call of the question and it had the privilege and immunity, it kind of guides you on what you're supposed to look for. So then when you start reading about the low income, so you start thinking about the scrutiny and the different classification. So I felt good at this point. Okay, good.
And again, even for myself, like, I'm not even thinking, just so you're aware, as I'm going through it, I'm not even thinking about the law just yet, especially as for what I've seen so far. And maybe you can have some ideas because, again, we have the laws down here that we need to know. But right now, we're just like taking it all in. I don't see anything egregious yet, but I think something for that is coming up. So the next sentence starts here. The statute does not authorize these incentives for out-of-state residents until they have established residency by living in state A for 1 year. And now here is where it gets tricky. So first off, if you are a non-state A resident, you cannot apply for this program. And even if you become a state A resident, you have to live there for at least 1 year. So there's your reading comprehension where, again, you have to dig a little bit deeper to realize that you are discriminating now for this PRP program on the grounds of two different things. In-state versus out of state, plus you are discriminating on length of residency. Okay. And this is where, Jacqueline, everybody, if you are tight with the law, this is where certain things should start to be firing off, right? So whenever you have something where people are being discriminated on the basis of how long they've lived somewhere, right? And their ability to get certain government programs and government, aid and different things like that based off of how long they live there. Put it in the chat, everybody. What does that trigger? What specifically does that trigger? Okay. I'm not getting too much in the chat right now. Again, I give some of us a little pass, still knocking off the cobwebs. But this is the type of stuff of what we're saying on how quick, accessible, and accurate the law has to be. Asta, you got to start it. Privileges and immunity. That's correct. Lewis, correct. Privileges and immunities. But it's which one? 14th Amendment or Article 4? So it's actually going to be the 14th, not Article 4. So look, a lot of us are kind of slow getting that out. We're putting other things. This is the type of stuff that you have to immediately see. Oh, you have to be there for more than 1 year. Privileges and immunities. That's 14th Amendment. But then the part where it says out of state residents, when you're discriminating in-staters versus out-of-staters, all right, now let's put in the chat, what is typically triggered when you have that scenario? All right. Carol says Commerce Clause. Yes, but let's get more specific. And there's more than one thing, actually. So again, the question is, when you have discrimination against out-of-staters, what are the things you should consider? There's more than one, and I want to see it in one submission, if you guys can, while you're putting in your answers. Yes, Ashley, it's going to be Dormant Commerce Clause and privileges and immunities, right? We need to have, again, the strong understanding of the law to automatically know when there's discrimination against out-of-staters, both of them are triggered. Dormant Commerce Clause and Article 4, privileges and immunities, are really peanut butter and jelly topics. And so, yes, we can put both of those down here, DCC and privileges and immunities. And then down here, we have 14th Amendment privileges and immunities. All right, all stuff that you got to be able to get out quickly as you're reading this. Let's continue. The statute also establishes factors for admission into the PRP. Okay, so now we're going deeper into the PRP and we're looking at what are the factors for admission, including the applicants. Okay, now we're going to get the list, their undergraduate GPA, their work experience, and race. All right, Lewis, which of these should be firing off signals in our brain?
Race.
Exactly. Whenever you're discriminating on the basis of race, we know that that's going to trigger a discussion, is going to trigger a problem, okay? But we're not done. A further factor is whether the applicant was raised in a targeted low-income or rural community or has lived in such a community for 3 or more years. Okay, so were you raised there or did you live there for an extended period of time? on the assumption that such applicant is more likely to remain there. So that, again, is just kind of a little bit of their reasoning. All right, so here we have the factors for admission. Factors for admission is telling us, right, that we are going to be assessing whether or not you get this or not based off of these things. Naturally, everybody, everything that goes here is going to trigger what topic within con law. Everything in here is going to just trigger what topic within con law when you're talking about grounds for deciding whether or not somebody's going to get something or not.
Justiciability?
Nope. Justiciability is about whether or not the federal court's going to be able to hear this. So we still want to be on the legislative side of things. All right. So I see some answers, none of which are right. What's the topic? What's the area of law? Yes, Karen got it in there. Equal protection. Erica got it. Equal protection. But again, look how many wrong answers we're having until we get to that point, right? Want it accurate. Equal protection. Let me go to Karen. Karen, can you speak? Oh, Karen can't speak. Okay. Erica, how about you? Erica, can you speak?
I can speak. It's just that I'm driving at this moment, honestly.
Okay, no worries, no worries. Anybody who put equal protection? Let's see. Shauna. Okay, and then we'll try one more. Dezina. All right, so you guys don't be. There we go, Dezina. There we go.
I felt the pressure. Someone needs to talk.
Somebody had to step up, and it's going to be you. So, Dezina, equal protection, right? Not even getting into like the detail of the law, but like, can you just like, what makes equal protection applicable here? Can you put it in your own words of what equal protection is all about?
Basically discrimination of one group of people against the others.
And say that one more time.
Discrimination of one group of people versus the other.
Exactly. Whenever you have the discrimination of one group of people versus another, that triggers the discussion. And then as we know, Dezina, that once we know that there is discrimination, it all comes down to what are you discriminating on the basis of? Dezina, does all discrimination end up getting shut down and deemed unconstitutional?
No, I think I mean, I don't know if I'm correct, but is this where we going to the rational basis, strict scrutiny and okay.
Yeah, but my first question is just like, does all discrimination get shut down as unconstitutional? And the answer is no.
No,
a lot of discrimination is upheld, but that's where we have to get into knowing the rules of knowing when it's likely going to be upheld versus not. That's half the battle with equal protection. So all that to say, everybody, like this is what you wanted to realize was a big equal protection discussion. We don't even need to have this stuff so far. Look, just by knowing the law, because to be honest with you all, that's what I was saying. This con law essay was a little bit on the easier side because for con law, they typically don't tell you what to discuss, right? Like you don't always get that. Sometimes it's just like, determine whether or not this state statute is going to be constitutional, and you have to assess what to talk about. But look how, without even relying on it, we're catching the fact that right here, this triggers, this privileges and immunities, that the out-of-state part, right, triggers dormant commerce clause and privileges and immunities here, that this right here triggers equal protection. This is where, again, strong understanding of the law should be leading to that. All right. Last paragraph. Doug has been admitted as a first-year student in a state A medical school. All right. So Doug has been admitted, and like you can already tell the writing on the wall. What's going to happen with Doug? He's not going to get into the PRP. Is it PRP? Yeah, he's not going to get into the PRP program. He's going to be upset. He has lived his entire life in a wealthy community in state B. And after Doug's PRP application was denied, he brought suit in federal court in state A. Okay. How should the federal court rule on Doug's claims that the PRP statute is unconstitutional under 1, 2, 3, and 4? Awesome. Let's see who's paying attention, strong reading comprehension, and all those things based off of what we spotted in our discussion and what we talked about. What's something that we should rule out, that we should not discuss based off of the call of the question and specifically giving us the issues to assess? What's something that we should not discuss? Lewis?
The justiciability.
So that's one, but we didn't talk about that one too much. But yeah, a lot of people that I saw essays for, they really leaned into justiciability. And, you know, as our method, as we talk about in Legally Fit about justiciability, is that, you know, that's always a good filler discussion. That's just like the pattern in the history of con law is like, when in doubt, you could throw in a little justiciability. But yeah, considering this is not an open-ended call of the question and it's very specific, I definitely don't think I would have discussed it. All right. But there's something else.
I was going to say, are you talking about race? Because I had a big deal with this because they never tell you Doug's race. Like, and I'm not going to assume because he was in a wealthy neighborhood.
But you don't need to know the race based off of how all of this works. I can see how that would take the mind into that, but no, we're definitely going to talk about race. I'm not seeing it in here. Right? What we're not going to discuss, everybody, is dormant commerce clause. We said that dormant commerce clause is, in fact, dormant commerce clause and privileges and immunities are peanut butter and jelly when you have out-of-staters versus in-staters. But this is a situation in which reading comprehension would lead you to like, all right, like there's no room to talk about dormant commerce clause because it's not included in my very specific 4 prompts. So DCC will not make the cut. Is there grounds about talking about this? If it had an open-ended call of the question, absolutely. But again, everybody, this is the level of like, again, attentiveness, knowing what is a possibility of being talked about, and then also having strong reading comprehension and being aligned with your call of the question that you're talking about the right things. All right. What need exactly? Of course, you have no free speech or religion. Again, not inside R4 here. So let's now talk about due process. And we can go to the chat on this. We said there's ultimately 2 options. I want everybody to, you know, put in the chat what they think. On this essay, are we talking about procedural due process and substantive, just procedural, or just substantive? Let's see. Are we talking about procedural and substantive due process, or procedural only, or substantive only? Okay, substantive only, substantive only. Carol, can we touch both? You tell me, Carol. You tell me. Okay, Daryl says both. Terry says both. Procedural only. Yep. Okay. So let's talk about this out loud. Dezina, can I come back to you?
Hi, yes, you may.
Okay, awesome.
Sorry, took you a while.
So Dezina, what is the typical scenario for procedural due process? Like what type of situation triggers procedural due process?
If I remember, a person actually needs to be like in court and something happened something happened in court, or he couldn't get into court, something that has to do with that.
Okay. All right. So I like that one. Let's see if we can get one more. Yeah, Lewis, you want to give it a shot?
Is it like you're already on the job and you get fired, but they don't give you a chance, like you don't get notice, and you're like a appeal process. Like they got to give you notice. There's got to be steps through the firing. So
okay. So yes, we're warming up to that, Lewis, right? So let's take a quick look at our legally fit outline for this, right? As a refresher on procedural due process. Procedural due process, Lewis, is when there is a deprivation of life, liberty, or property interest, right? Which means you are being deprived of it, okay? And that's the key here. Life is when, right, you're being, given the death penalty and things like that. That's obviously not the case here. Liberty is when you have to be free of bodily restraints. Is anybody restraining Doug? No. Being free to engage in conduct protected by the Constitution or statute, that's not an issue. It also says the right to engage in any of the common occupations of life and the right to pursue a chosen profession, right? So that's the trigger. But again, you have to look at the patterns and how this is typically tested. When we're looking at the patterns for, right here, it even says common triggers that we have. It says firing a government employee in retaliation for them exercising a constitutional right. Or we have some triggers here of revoking a person's license for violating a state law. And again, as Lewis said, not having a fair hearing, a fair trial to remove that, right? And not giving them the ability to appeal it and things like that. So Lewis, when we refresh ourselves on what procedural due process is this fact pattern fitting within that typical trigger or scenario for procedural due process?
No.
No, it's not really highlighting at all, everybody. It's not highlighting, what the process was for appeals or that there was a fair. And again, even beyond that, this is about somebody trying to get something. That's not what procedural due process is typically about. It's about when something is being taken from you, and then again, you don't have a proper procedure for assessing whether that was right, right? We're taking away your freedom. We're putting you in jail. We're taking away your job. Here, they're not taking anything away from Doug. They're just not giving him this free money and this tuition waiver. So all that to say, you either should have not talked about procedural due process at all, or you should have just talked about it really quickly as a raise and dismiss, considering this is not a great fact pattern for Doug to find this law unconstitutional. Some essays, right, I've seen where procedural due process, as we have here, was the only one discussed. And that in and of itself is going to be the issue spotting difficulty that lowers our score, right, when we see that as a grader. So we would have talked about substantive due process and focused on that there. And then we would have talked about equal protection. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the analysis and some of the sufficiency of analysis here in a second. But the next thing I want to do is just show you guys my outline that I quickly made for this. Because again, the next thing is not only spotting these issues, everybody, but it's about quickly having your structure and your format for discussing them. All right. Replace current share. All right. Oh, and actually too, one thing before I even go back to that, one thing that, again, for reading comprehension, before you even get into issue spotting that we like to do within Legally Fit, is to ground yourself by asking why are the parties upset and why. So Lewis, here it's Doug that's suing. Why is Doug upset and what does he want? And we just need to lay this out because it's going to guide us in our analysis, in our arguments. Why is Doug upset?
Well, Doug is upset because although he was admitted into one of the state medical schools, he was denied the opportunity to participate in the PRP program, which would give him free tuition and a $10,000 stipend.
Yes. So he's mad because he has to pay now and he's not going to get the stipend. Good. There we go. Love it. I even like how in your head, like, oh yeah, it's a stipend, right? We're processing it. That's awesome. All right. So let's go to our outline for this. For again, the essays that I've seen, I have not seen what I would expect to see as I have here, a clear organization for it, right? So when you're talking about substantive due process, here are your 3 steps. Identify the fundamental right, select the level of scrutiny, and apply the scrutiny. right? And once you do so, right, it's pretty straightforward. So you would need to have gone through your outline and your recollection of it. And it's like, what fundamental right do I have here, if any? And at first, it seems like you don't have any, right? If you're going from the top of that list, it's like, okay, the right to marry, no. The right to use contraceptives, no. Right? The right to raise one's children, no. But one of the last ones on that list is the right to travel, and specifically dealing with durational residency requirements, right? Any volunteers, right, could again show the expectation on how we're supposed to know these laws and even make sense of it right now. What does that right to travel and having that durational residency requirement look like? The whole thing of a fundamental right is that this is something fundamental to American living. What would you say is the reasoning, the philosophy? Can somebody explain what this whole right to travel is? What is it affording us as Americans? Lewis.
So what it's doing is protecting the citizens, saying that it's okay to go to another state and you won't be mistreated. You'll be treated as fair as the other citizen.
Exactly. So the government wants people to be able to do what, Lewis?
To travel, to move around, to relocate, and
yes.
not be afraid if they leave one state, go to the other state, they won't qualify for certain benefits or certain things because they're new.
Exactly. Because if going to another state, you're going to be disadvantaged. People would never want to leave their current state because they don't want to swallow that pill of that discrimination. So yes, Lewis, everybody, we have to be able to talk about the law in that way. And then again, we all can automatically see how that comes up here, right? Where this is in theory preventing issues or interfering with the right to travel, because even if I do move to state A, I'm going to be disadvantaged because I'm new to state A versus people who have been there. So that becomes the relevancy of right to travel as your fundamental right. Then you simply talk about it. That's it, just the way we just did right now. And then you go into, well, since we have a fundamental right at play, we're going to apply strict scrutiny. And then you have to get into the weeds of analyzing your strict scrutiny. All right. Then after that, you have to remember your formula for equal protection. And again, right, without even looking at it, you should know equal protection, 3-step process. First thing I'm going to do is identify the classification. Then based off of the classification, I'm going to determine the level of scrutiny. And then I'm going to apply the scrutiny that I've selected. All right. You had to realize that these were all the discriminations. Right? You had a lot of discriminations here. Every single factor was a discrimination. People with assumingly lower GPAs were going to be discriminated against. People with a particular race, we don't know which one, were going to be discriminated against. People with less work experience were going to be discriminated against. Based off of where you lived, you were going to be discriminated against. And then also how long you lived in certain neighborhoods. These were all the factors listed in the prompt. And look how you have to generalize it, right? You have to say again, the one in particular was whether you were raised in a low targeted income. That was the factor. But the discrimination is basically on where you were raised, the location of your upbringing. So you assess what they're discriminating on the basis of. Once you have those lists, then you go into, well, where does that fall within identifying the level of scrutiny? Is that a suspect classification, a quasi-suspect classification, or none of the above? All right. And I already have the answer here for you. And this is, again, stuff that you would want to automatically quickly know, is that all these things, except for race, would get you rational basis, right? Because we have a very finite list for strict scrutiny and intermediate. For strict scrutiny, it's things like race, national origin, right? For intermediate scrutiny, it's things like gender, right? The one with being children born out of wedlock, all right? So you have this finite list for quasi and suspect classifications, and the only one that we have there is race, and we're simply going to put that. Lewis, are you still there? This is back to where, if you're noticing now,
I'm here.
It doesn't matter which race they're discriminating off the basis of, right? It's just the fact that they are discriminating on the basis of race. That's all we need to know, that we have to apply strict scrutiny. So from there, Yeah. So from there, you would want to apply, talk about applying rational basis review, because again, there's all these things that are just simply non-suspect classifications, but ultimately you want to do strict scrutiny because you do have race. And then again, this analysis is going to be the same as this strict scrutiny analysis above. So you have a C above here. After that, you go into your 14th Amendment. And so this one is really quick because 14th Amendment literally just says this clause prevents the government from putting in durational residency requirements, again, as it interferes with the right to travel. And so you just had to identify that, know the difference between the two privileges and immunities. And here you're isolating the fact that you had to live in state A for at least 1 year. That in and of itself is showing me as a grader that you know the difference between the two privileges and immunities, and you have correctly isolated and identified them, and you lay it out. This is also where we have to know that not every call of the question, right? Every number is going to get the same length of discussion. So yeah, this one's going to be very short. But then you get to privileges and immunities, Article 4, and that one's going to be a little bit longer because it has a bit more of a framework to the discussion. This one is about the prevention of discrimination against out-of-staters, especially related to the right to earn a living. So this is where you have to then get into, you have non-state A residents that do not have access to this program for state A's medical school. That's the discrimination, which is making it free for them and the $10K annual payment. The non-state A residents have to pay tuition and don't get those. When you look at your framework and your rules, some of the things that you look in for privileges and immunities is that, are they regulating something simple as like hobbies, right? Which is like, oh, we have a Topgolf inside of California, and if you are a state A resident, you have to pay, $10 to use Topgolf. But if you're coming from out of state, you have to pay $5,000. Well, you're discriminating on the basis of in-state versus out of state, but this is something as simple as a hobby. And typically that has been allowed. Like the government doesn't get involved in shooting those down. But if it's something related to, let's say, livelihood, all right. And so now it's like, oh, for, let's say, commercial fishermen, right? And that's the example to the shrimp case. So for commercial fishermen, if I'm charging state A residents only $50 for their license to fish for, fish to sell, but then I'm charging out-of-state people who want to come in here to fish, I'm charging you all $20,000 to do that. Well, this is not a mere hobby. This is regarding the right to earn a living. And so then that does cross over to being something that would be shut down. So that's, again, as I talked about with Jacqueline very early on, those are the type of things that, like, you got to be so immersed in all this law that stuff is easily accessible, that you're using that type of stuff to make your analogies and your comparisons when you're discussing privileges and immunities, Article 4 here. All right, so yes, before I get into a little bit of trying to do some of the arguments, right? Let me go ahead and actually I can keep this up for a second. Yeah, any thoughts or questions? Did you have a thought or question, Gabby, or is that accidental?
I have a question.
Okay.
Now I'm literally going through my essay, and I feel like I wrote most of the things that we discussed, but like I got 50 points for this essay. And I was just wondering, I think I know why, because like the structure, whatever I have, it like it sucks. Sorry, for my language, but like I feel like my structure is my biggest enemy, like how I structure my essay.
Yeah, and Erica, actually, I mean, as you're offering it right now, I was looking for a volunteer because I think it would be great for us as a class to be able to see a work product. So if you or anybody else, yeah. By the way, are you open to sending me the essay in the Zoom and I can open it up and then we can start to see like what it should look like or where we went wrong?
Honestly, I don't really feel comfortable.
Yeah, no
To
worries.
be
And I totally
honest,
understand.
I'm sorry, guys. I really don't feel comfortable, but I would love to send it to you so you can see like what like the mess that I made, to be honest.
Yes.
Because I remember after the exam I was like, "Oh my God, I know the answer. I knew everything, like the rules and everything, but like my writing literally sucks. Like I just need to
Okay.
improve my writing."
Yeah, so let's go ahead and I got somebody who I got a couple now that have sent them privately. So I won't disclose who sent them and I'll open these up and then maybe Erica, we can start to see. And the people who sent them to me privately, can you also tell me what score you received on them? So that way we can like give that as a point of reference for everybody as well. But yes, Erica, so to your point, you know, and as I'll get into this, just spotting the right issues is literally step number one, but you can still get a low score because after step one, again, you still have to have a sufficient discussion and time management to finish the entire thing. And those are very important pieces as well. All right, so I'm going to bring up now the first one that I received as a sample, and let's take a look at this together. All right. And again, I'm going to message you as well so you could see, but I need the people who sent me their essays to send me the score that they got for it as well. But while we wait for that, let's take a look at this. All right. So we have number 4 starts off with government action. In order to sue in a due process, the 14th, you must have a state actor. So yes, a lot of people talked about this. For con law, I don't always personally talk about government actor as like I do for a crim pro question. But yes, ultimately there has to be a government actor involved here. This is all a state A law. So that's something quick and easy to maybe get some easy points and discuss. So not mad at it. Don't think
I
it was
cannot hear you, honestly.
Oh, Lewis, can you hear me just fine? Or is that Erica thing? Or
I can hear you fine.
okay, Erica, that might be something with the computer on your end.
Now I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay.
Can you zoom in a little bit too for some of the people, DeAndre?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Is that good on your guys' end now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So the next thing is we see on this essay is some justiciability discussion, which again, I mentioned that like you could get away with talking about it, but when you have very specific calls of the question, I would err on the side probably of not, but let's see how many doctrines we talked about. Just standing, I'm not mad at it. So I think this is fine for the California bar. We have to do that song and dance sometimes, so it's good. If this was UBE, I definitely would not be talking about it, but for California, I'm not mad at just standing. All right. Let's see if we have a good rule. Standing to sue in federal court requires the case of controversy is ripe and not moot. It also prevents individuals. Okay, so this is, again, part of success is more times than not remembering our full and accurate rule. And this is not our rule for standing. Our rule for standing is it's the 3 elements. The elements for standing are you have to have suffered an actual or imminent injury. The injury is caused by the defendant and the injury can be redressed by a favorable decision. So you have those 3 elements, redressability, causation, and injury. So yes, rules, right, are important. All right, let's get down to the due process of the 14th Amendment. So the first thing I'm noticing in this essay, again, is I would want something very clean on the first question in a substantive due process. I would want a subheading for substantive due process to let us know we're doing that. And this looks like here, right, we're focused on procedural due process, that no right, economic interest, or freedom should be taken away without the due process of law. So again, I think it was very common right? For the person who submitted this essay, that a lot of people focused on procedural, but for the reasons we just discussed about 20 minutes ago, I do not think that that is where we wanted to spend our time, okay? So what, again, we're missing that structure of substantive due process. Do I have an individual right? Yes, it's right to travel, et cetera, et cetera. And the thing is that under procedural due process, everybody, right? Like the structure that we have, because I saw a lot of people talking about procedural due process and then getting into the scrutiny test, but that's not how you go through it. The procedural due process is after you assess that there has been a deprivation of life, liberty, or freedom, then you get into this question of, was a fair process used? And then there's like a list of factors in the rule that you look to see if it was a fair process. So that's just, again, where as a grader, when you're mixing scrutiny tests with procedural due process, that is when I'm seeing, right, we don't know the law very well and we're muddling it together. All right, let's see how the equal protection one went. Equal protection of the 14th Amendment says that all people should be treated equally under the law. It protects fundamental rights like the right to travel across the states. Okay. It doesn't say anything here about discrimination, right? Which again is something that I would look for. So again, here the rule is very short and is leaving a lot to be desired, right? We want a lot more fullness there. An example of what I would have as my introductory rule for equal protection is the Equal Protection Clause prohibits state and federal government from unreasonably treating similarly situated people differently. Equal protection applies to the federal government through the Fifth Amendment and to the state government through the 14th Amendment. The framework for assessing an equal protection violation is: step 1, identify the classification; step 2, select the level of scrutiny; and step 3, apply the scrutiny. And that sets me up now to have then those 3 sections, right? Here we just jump straight into an analysis. Here D will be arguing that the state is discriminating against him because while he got him into the, he's being denied equal protection by being denied entry into the PRP. So this is essentially conclusory, right? Again, like we're not having the sub rules of the other section. Looking at that outline of what we had, that is where we have to say, what are the grounds for the discrimination here? This is where I'm looking for GPA, the facts of where you lived and how long you lived there, of race, all that has to be mentioned here. Okay. And then you need the next step, which is like literally laying out the rules. Okay. Strict scrutiny. You apply strict scrutiny when you get these classifications, one of which is race. You get these, you get intermediate scrutiny when these classifications are at play, and you list those out. And then you say rational basis is for all other. And then you mention that all these other ones of, again, GPA, et cetera, are going to fall under rational basis. Now, let's take a look at just like, let's try to talk about this first before we look at this analysis. Can I have a volunteer on, again, somebody new preferably, on who I can try to talk this through with? Again, safe space, right? We're all in here dusting off the cobwebs, but let's see if, again, we can kind of like work through even knowing and being able to articulate what a sufficient analysis looks like. So any volunteers on who wants to like go through application of a scrutiny test with me? All right, you guys know I'm not afraid to call on somebody. All right, let me try Sammy. Sammy, are you there?
Sammy's unavailable. She's at.
Sammy's unavailable. Okay. Christian, are you there?
I am.
All right. Let's talk about this, Christian. So we're talking about equal protection. We have these factors for the PRP, right? It's all this discrimination. And now we're trying to assess whether or not it's going to be upheld or not. Let's apply strict scrutiny first, right? Strict scrutiny requires that there is a compelling government interest. First off, hopefully we can recall some things, right? And feel free, everybody, to help them out in the chat if need be. What are some of the type of things that typically satisfy compelling government interests? What are some things that amount to a compelling government interest for people, for the government to discriminate on the basis of things like race, right, national origin, et cetera? Christian, do you remember, like,
I believe
what are some
the least discriminatory or the least discriminatory
I'm looking for what are the types of things, what are the type of situations that we're dealing with that justify, right, strict scrutiny, that justify discriminating on the basis of race. If the context of the situation is what? Let me look in the chat, see if we're getting any help here. Okay, nope, not yet. So everybody, you want to remember that when you're thinking about a compelling interest, let's see if I got something.
What?
Yeah, when you think about a compelling state interest, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, we know they can discriminate against race when they're trying to right a wrong that was done in the past to like a particular group.
So, and that one's a tricky one. That's not going to be a guaranteed situation for, again, like things that amount to compelling government interest. But some of the things that typically amount to compelling government interest, it's a short list. When it's a matter of national security, when it's a matter of national security, can anybody remember the case that we learned that was a matter of national security in which they justified discriminating on the basis of race? Yep, communities upwards, public health is another one. Good. But yeah, does anybody remember the case where we discriminated on the basis of race because it was a matter of national security? It's not 9/11. It was the case when we were in the
Is it World War II or World War I?
It's something along exactly
Japanese internment camps.
Exactly. When you had the concentration camps for Japanese because we were in war, and they said, well, we don't know who is working with us or against us. So if we see somebody of Japanese descent, we're going to put them into a detention camp. That was a discrimination on the basis of race, and it was upheld. Again, why? Because the compelling government interest element was satisfied, because this is a matter of national security. Other grounds for compelling government interest are public health and public safety, right? For example, like if all of a sudden, you know, we have another pandemic of some disease, and let's say it was scientifically backed that this disease was being distributed by one particular race, it's like that would be grounds for then putting all of those people in isolation as needed and discriminating on that basis for the sake of public health. All right, so boom. So Christian, going back to now our fact pattern, knowing that and refreshing ourselves on the law, do we have one of those historical categories to play with? Or no, we don't?
We do not.
Christian, this is part of the analysis. We do. So if we remember in the very beginning of the fact pattern, all right, I can't go back and forth here.
Was it public health?
Yeah, because remember, it says that the whole reason why they're doing this is because we are having a decline of doctors, and it is adversely affecting the health of those living in low income. So 100% here, the government is going to be arguing that we do have a compelling government interest, that this is affecting public health, specifically in low income and rural communities, and therefore this element should be met. And everybody, we should be concluding that that is a very strong argument under the circumstances. You could try to counter it, right, and mention that, well, this is just limited to state A. It's not that big. It's not a national issue and things like that. But I don't even think it'd be really worth a big counter argument. Like, this is public health. So all that said, Christian, that's a great example of, like, we miss that sometimes on the day of the exam, of realizing, like, yes, this is the government interest. It's public health. And yes, this is compelling. And if it's compelling for strict scrutiny, it's going to meet important for intermediate, and it's definitely going to meet rational for RBR, or legitimate, I should say. Sorry. All right. So Christian, now we've done the first element of whether or not we have a compelling government interest. The next thing we would have to discuss under strict scrutiny is the government's way of solving the problem the least discriminatory method available? What do you think, Christian?
I don't think so. There's other ways that they could accomplish it.
Well, that's only a C answer, because you haven't told me why. So you got to give me why.
Got it. Okay, let me think this one out, because it threw off my whole analysis, considering that I didn't catch this. I went down a different path.
Got you. Okay, so let me see if I can get some other help, and we can try to think through it on the spot. Let me go to Edna. And I know it's first time, but at this point we have the rule. We're just trying to see if we can like get the angle. So yeah, we're having to analyze whether or not what the government did here was the least discriminatory means. And let's ground ourselves. The whole thing, the whole problem we're trying to solve is what, Edna?
You said what?
The
The public health. The public health issue. Yeah.
Specifically in?
You said specifically what?
Specifically in state
In the
A.
least in state A. Okay, I thought you meant the least restrictive area, meaning.
So we're trying to solve the issue of public health, specifically having less doctors, and it's affecting the rural areas and the low income areas in state A. Okay,
Right.
And so in order to fix this, state A did what exactly?
You said, state A didn't do anything. I think that was the problem because of the rate.
Well, no, they did, right? State A created a program, all right? State A created a program that incentivized people with all these things, a free tuition, et cetera, that you had to work inside of state A in one of these areas, right? For at least 5 years.
All right.
So far, does that seem like a pretty good job at solving that particular problem?
Okay.
Right, that's a question. So far, does that seem like a pretty good job at solving that problem? We don't have enough doctors in rural and low.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Exactly. But we're not done with what the law was. The statute also said that this is only for people who have lived in state A for at least 1 year.
Right.
Does that seem to be necessary to achieve the goal?
No.
Exactly.
No.
And that is what we have to see, right, Edna? Christian, we have to see and make that argument on behalf of the challenger that this is not the least discriminatory means. You could have solved this problem by simply offering this incentive to come into state A and offering, these incentives only if you stayed here for 5 years, but just opened it up to everybody. And you would have sufficiently solved the problem of having more doctors in these areas. So that, what you would then argue, is a least or less discriminatory way of achieving the same goal. But everybody, you have to have done enough analysis to, again, get into that quickly to realize, what am I doing here with this analysis? I need to show and come up with this circumstance. I need to come up with a way to get the same job done, to achieve the goal that they're saying they're trying to achieve in a less discriminatory way. And again, here it was like just simply saying, like, we could have still achieved the goal of more doctors in these areas by not requiring them to be state A residents for at least a year to get admitted into this program. You see what I'm saying, Edna?
I absolutely see what you're saying. Yes.
Good. And that's what happens, right? In both real world and in these fact patterns, right? The government, like, oh yeah, this is public health, so we get to do what we want to do. And it's like, yeah, it's public health, so we're going to give you some leeway to get things done, but like, be good. Don't try to throw in that arbitrary part that's for your own political agenda, et cetera, et cetera. It has to be like the least discriminatory means possible, right? And here you didn't use that. So that's the type of analysis, everybody, that you wanted to be discussing in your scrutiny discussion, right? All of that needs to be in there. So let's take a look now at the scrutiny discussion here. Let's just go ahead and go down to the strict scrutiny and see how it stacks up. So D may agree with State A's argument about education not being a fundamental right. However, he will argue that the PRP program is discriminating against him because of his race, which would then require, okay, yeah, the strict scrutiny test. Okay. Here, State A statute, in addition to the tuition waiver, okay, statute also establishes factors. Okay, we do not have any facts about race. It is possible one can assume that the legislature prioritized applicants of a certain race. However, it is possible that being okay, therefore, absent facts of how race was used in the admission is unlikely that he will be able to bring a lawsuit based on strict scrutiny. However, if he's so the challenge here and the difficulty here is that we kind of went into an analysis that I'm not really sure what the guidance is. Like, I'm not necessarily seeing application of a rule. We're just having a lengthy discussion on whether truly, in fact, race was used, how exactly it was used, you know, because again, it doesn't tell us how it was. And I see that part being said here, but what I'm expecting, what I'm thinking is going to be rewarded the most points on this essay is the fact that race is a factor. And they're telling us race is a factor. And in order to use race as a factor, you have to pass strict scrutiny. And that's where I want to see strict scrutiny is met if, right, element 1, compelling government interest, or 2, it was a the least discriminatory means used, right? It was necessary. All right. So one good thing that this essay has going for it, everybody, which happens in the arbitrary nature of essay grading, is that if I'm a grader, right, I like the spacing that I see here, and I'm seeing like the right headings, right? I'm seeing like, okay, yeah, equal protection. I'm seeing rational basis, strict scrutiny. So there's some like good like surface level. This is almost as if it was like, in my opinion, like a plate of food that like, man, that mac and cheese, right? Like, oh, the noodles is looking cooked, the cheese is all melted on top, but once you get inside of it, it's like ain't no salt, there's no pepper in here. It's not filled with that rich flavor. So that's what I'm seeing in this essay, is that we don't have rules that are rich and accurate. We don't have analysis that then is actually to the framework that we want to be ready to deploy for these heavily tested doctrines. Yeah, Julio, question.
Yes, not to harp or kind of come in negative on this, but I noticed there was a line where it was talking about rational basis, I think, but it goes into strict scrutiny in the description, and it also states that the defendant must prove that it does not meet the test, where it should be the government. Right? No, keep going. And I think that might just be something that we have to, right there. The rational basis scrutiny says under the strict scrutiny test. So that might be something where we as test takers may just confuse the specific point that we're talking about at that particular time. So I just saw that.
Yeah, and these are the little things that, again, like there is leeway for. So yeah, Julio, that's a good catch. And yeah, we have a rational basis heading, and then we have, yeah, under the strict scrutiny test, D as a challenger must have to prove that the law is not rationally related to a legitimate government interest. So yeah, technically this is supposed to say rational basis. So yep, sometimes we have those little simple mistakes that we obviously want to, you know, limit as much as possible. And again, everybody, and that's the other thing that I don't like about the exam, but is the reality of it, is that these things are graded in like 5 minutes, right? By these, you know, essay graders. So sometimes that works in our favor. The person who submitted this essay said that for the California bar, they got a 60 on this essay. I believe that this 60 is extremely generous. And so this is one of those areas in which this was a favorable result, I think, of like having some good headings and then maybe going through it pretty quickly. So sometimes it works in our favor, but then other times it doesn't, where, you know, they grade too quickly and they just like, I'm not seeing what I like, I'm going to give this a low score. So that's, again, the arbitrary nature of how this is graded. Edna, question?
Yeah, I do. Just a comment based on the formatting that you're discussing. Since I'm getting ready to take it in February for the first time, I'm just now starting to practice writing, right? So in my practicing, I've actually just been doing the heading, like just learning how to issue spot, how to outline, and those issues that I spot when I outline, those are my headings. And then just really locking in my rules and just kind of lowballing the analysis, because what I heard so far was that they just don't have a lot of time. So if I make it look really pretty, then I'm kind of locked in with getting a much better score than trying to, and because the writer of that
Yes.
essay seemed to have been writing quite a bit. Like, you know what I mean? They were,
Yeah,
it
they
was
was putting some stuff in there. Exactly. Yeah, they was putting some work into it. And again, but think of it this way, you know, analogy. Let's say you go into a, you know, a cooking competition. Let's use a cooking analogy. You're trying to win that cooking competition, right? Do you want to have a dish that you present that looks good, right? Has the, like, you know, look test, the cheese is melted, then everything looks cooked. But man, like, I hope they don't get to those greens, because I know those greens look good, but if they actually taste it, they're gonna realize what, you know. So that is kind of what you're playing with when you're talking about what you're saying, right? Where it's like, I have an essay, everything looks good, but really, if you pop the hood, if you really get into it, you're gonna realize it's not
much
as
there.
it looks. And now you're putting yourself at risk of not passing, at risk of getting a lower score. So what you want to do is you want your plate to be top, you know, to bottom. Everything looks good, smells good, tastes good. And so that's what
even though they may not really read all of it.
And look, even though if you're doing that same analogy, and it's just like they may just eat the mac and cheese and be like, damn, this is the best mac and cheese. This person wins. Like, hold on, you didn't taste everything else on the plate. You got to taste everything. And they're like, all right, I don't need to. And you're like, fine, whatever, I won. It's all good. So yes, even though they don't always look at everything, you got to be prepared if they do, because it's when they do it and you're not ready that you then get that 50, that 40, and stuff like that becomes then really difficult to overcome when you're talking about passing the bar exam. And
is that second read that I've seen on some of the hypos that people posted on social media?
So the second read thing, yes, let's talk about that for a second, everybody. The second read, which again is like highlighting just what we're talking about. So first off, a student only gets into the second read if they were within, it was either 30 or 40 points. So you're close enough to passing that they say, you know what, let's put a second reader, right? A second taste tester on your work product to see if you were close enough to, if you should have passed, right? And so what they'll do is say, all right, you know, let's say we have Lewis, who is the applicant, and he was within 30 points. And let's say, Edna, you gave him, let's just say, a 50 for his con law essay. Well, then since he was within 40 points, I'm going to grade that con law essay as well. And then I give him whatever I think it is. So let's say I give him also a 50, but I could also give him a 55. I could also give him a 60. I could give him a 60. I can give him whatever I want. And talking back to the arbitrary nature of how this is graded, it is very common for two different graders to grade the same essay and have something as big as a 15-point difference. That makes no sense.
Yeah.
15-point difference, right? And that's California. On the UBE, so you're talking 2-point differences, right? And the whole nature is that this is so arbitrary that you just got to be A1. You got to be on top of your game to just not even be in this position of being subject to that. You need your work product. If there is any arbitrariness, I need it to be like, is this a 90 or a 75?
Yes.
Is this a 90 or an 80? Not is this a 55 or 65? So yes, that is what we have to strive for to limit our risk.
Do they have more time on that second read?
They don't say anything about different circumstances, and I don't even know if they know that they're doing a second read. So that's stuff they keep in-house on, whether they dig deep. But I've seen it both ways. And I've seen it where the second read goes significantly lower. I've also seen where the second read will jump up and go higher. So it's just literally like all over the place.
Okay, thank you.
All right, of course. I saw another hand up. Yes, Erica.
Yeah, it was me. So, but literally, I wanted to talk about the second read. I saw my husband's results, like essay, when he got one of his essays, he got first read it was 70 or 75, and then second read it was 55. So what I wanted to say is that even if you literally pass your first read, the second read is they go through every single detail of your essay, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Even
And
if first read did like they don't really read the analysis, for example, you can just sit and hope that like second read will be the same thing.
Yes. And I will say, because I've done this for 10 years now and I've seen countless reread, it goes both ways. Sometimes the second grader is harder. Sometimes the second grader is more lenient. So it does depend. But yeah, all that to say, it's like the moral of the story, everybody. And I think we learned it, right? And we see it with the essay right here. Like, again, this particular person got a 60, right? Which is like, oh man, I'll take that 60 on this essay based off of everything that we've discussed. Right. But it could have easily been another grader who gave that a 55 or 50. And so the reality is that, again, we want to have our reading comprehension, spot all the right issues. And again, I think this person did a really good job with more or less spotting the right issues, but the rules were not there. The detail and the sufficiency of the rules, this person did not walk into, okay, substantive due process, here's my framework. Step 1, is there a fundamental right? Step 2, what scrutiny do I apply? Step 3, apply the scrutiny. Equal protection. Step 1, identify the classification. Step 2, select the right scrutiny, right? Like, you should have templates for every area of the law to have these structured discussions that, again, are what we're looking for and put you in the best position to get the points, as opposed to like these open-ended discussions that, again, are more susceptible to receiving a lower score. So knowing the law, memorizing the law, having these templates down, these are all part of the recipe for success. Okay, so thank you to that volunteer for showing us that essay. Again, we are doing the repeater assessment and strategy calls. So if anybody wants to like actually one-on-one with me, go through their essays, you can book that one-on-one private coaching session. Monique, if you have that on hand, actually, I have it too. We can put that link in the chat. Let me put that in the chat for you all right now. But yeah, that concludes the, the focus and the content of today's session. Hopefully it was an eye opener. Before we get out of here, the way that I love to end sessions are, what are your main takeaways from the session? So we can get a little reflective just for a quick second. Edna, I'll start with you as a, eventual first-time taker. What was your biggest takeaway from today's session?
I think the biggest takeaway for me would be to really make sure that my reading comprehension is spot on. So for me, that looks like just taking a little bit more time in line for lining it, because I'm a little bit slower. I'm also well over 50, so that is my excuse. But I have to go a little slower. And the outlining is going to be key for me based on what you did in this session. Learning how to outline it so that I have those proper head notes to be able to go in there and make it look nice for these graders. And
yes,
also making sure that I have my proper rules. So or at least the elements for those rules. Those are my 3 takeaways from this evening.
Good. I love all of those. I want to say again, back to even what you're saying, that, yeah, I think that for a properly prepared student, I think this essay was really easy. And I think after maybe us all going through it together, we can see that, right? Because it's like they tell us what to talk about. So if they tell us what to talk about, and then boom, I know my framework. All right, bring in my framework. If I've done these analyses before and I know, okay, yeah, for compelling government interest, it's typically things like public health. Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. So that's my angle for this argument, right? So if you're, boom, applying your framework and then you're relying on your previous practice to like help yourself with the arguments and the angles, this was a really simple walkthrough. So yeah, that's a good point. And again, easier said than done, right? Like I said, this is for the properly prepared student. To be properly prepared, that's where why I'm saying you have to put in 600 to 650 hours to get to that point. Because not only do you need to do that for equal protection, due process, privileges and immunities, you got to do that for contracts, parole evidence rule, traditional option contract, right? Exactly. The laundry list of things. And that's where the challenge is. So with the bar and that perspective, in my opinion, it's not that it's hard, right? It's just that it's a lot. And you have to be so immersed and recall things so quickly that that's where the challenge really lies. And so just to end that before I go to Julio, when you mentioned, right, that you're 50 and that you move a little slower, I want you to think like the tortoise and the hare, right? The turtle and the rabbit, and the turtle, right, wins the race going slow. So that's not necessarily an issue, but Edna, everybody, especially the tortoise, you have to move surgically. You have to move with absolute accuracy and know what you're doing. So yeah, it won't be an issue of moving a little slower. But again, we're going to want to increase our speed a little bit here and there, but it's more so like, am I hitting the marks? Am I hitting it with absolute accuracy? So yes, thank you for sharing.
My pleasure.
All right. And let's do, one more, Julio. Julio, what was your takeaway from today?
Well, I'd like to thank you. And I'd like to also thank the person who shared their essay with us, because I think that really showed me at any rate, a lot on how to stick with what we learn in school, the IRAC or the CREAC structure, and kind of be very structured in that, so that we don't kind of get our rule statements or analysis and all that confused, and make it probably clearer for the tester to grade the essay. I did have a question for you, though, and something along the side, the same things as Edna. I'm a little bit older, and I actually suffered a couple of strokes after I graduated from law school. So that kind of affected the last time I took the test, which was last year. And it affects my memory a little bit. But I'm working to overcome that. But my point that I cannot overcome is my speed factor, just like Edna. And the essays that I wrote for the last bar exam that I took, I got a maximum of 100 or 800 words on the essay, 2,000, and I was basically just sticking to the point. That the rule and how the fact patterns just went right into that rule and the conclusion, and it took me an hour, to write one of those. So I was just wondering how much that might affect the grading or the of these essays. I think the highest grade I got on my essays, which was a contracts essay, was 65, and basically got just 60s on the rest of the essays on 155. So that is the where I was. But like I said, the word count was probably around the maximum was 800, but probably around 600 words was the final count, and how that might affect the grading.
Absolutely. Great question. And I want to give you definitely an answer right now, and then also invite you to schedule a 15-minute consultation, where we can one-on-one dive into that in more depth. And so the quick answer that I'll give you is that word count 1,000% matters. And the reality of it, Julio, is that as a grader, they don't know that this essay is being written by Julio, right, who has certain circumstances that only allow him to get out 800 words in this time frame. And so it's judged amongst everybody else. And the reality is that when you have, again, what we're looking at as far as norm and what becomes almost, the status quo of 1,500, 1,750, or 2,000 words, the 800 is just going to be simply lacking in the discussion. That means, the rules are shorter and not all there. The analysis, the counter arguments, there's going to be a lot of things missing. And so I think somebody put a great suggestion, Sammy put in there, have you looked into accommodations? I think that would be a great thing to look into if you haven't already, of getting extra time. So that way we can try to get to that mark. But to answer your question, yes, I think something like only submitting 800 words is going to definitely, consistently affect your ability to score well on the essay portion.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, yeah. And again, like I said, if you want to schedule a call, let me know. And by the way, everybody, this is also why I recommend that it's very challenging to handwrite the exam, especially in this day and age when like so few people do. Because again, even the handwriting is the same concept. You're getting way less on the page compared to what, you know, the general expectations for what you put out is along the lines of a typer. So these are, again, like not the best circumstances, but they are the realities that I think it makes it more challenging when we're handwriting or again, typing, but not typing fast. So all those, you know, that's another thing too, just to consider for those that are slow typers, consider taking typing classes. I think that goes a long way. And that's a big advantage for those that are able to literally just get more words on the page, right, in that 1 hour. So typing classes could be beneficial. All right.
Carol has a question, but she can't raise her hand. Carol, can you unmute right now?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I just want to say that I learned more in this session than I did from my own con law professor. So it's just, this is a doggone shame. But anyway, I am officially a 3L as of this month. But I've been, you know, checking in with you from time to time, and I just love your program. I just wanted your advice on when I definitely want to do early bar prep. And
Yes.
I wanted to know, what is your suggestion or advice on when would be a good time for me to start that so that I can get the edge?
Yeah.
You know, so that when the time comes, I'm not cramming. I want it, you know, slow and steady, slow burn.
Yes.
I think I work better that way because I work
Awesome.
slower.
Love it.
So
Yeah.
when
Way
can we
to,
officially start the process?
what exam are you taking? The July exam?
No, I don't take the bar until I think it's 2027. So I have a ways to go, but
Oh, nice.
I want to get going now. Like I want to, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to wait till
Yeah.
if I got to do 2 bar preps, that's fine. But I'd
So
like to
Carol,
start early.
So we've done that. So yeah, that's a special circumstance. And first off, you and anybody else in the similar shoes, I love it because yes, like we have to break this norm of just like, oh, 10 weeks is enough to study for this exam.
Right.
So the fact that you are, years away from it and making sure you take the right steps.
Well,
The
not years, but you know, maybe about a year and a half, I think. Yeah.
Well, yeah, 2027, exactly. But
Yeah.
exactly. You know, give or take. But all that to say, like pretty far out. And like, I think that's great. I have other students that have done the same thing. And so there's definitely ways that we can do that.
Okay.
Let me give you the link in here for the 15-minute consultation. And
Okay.
I put it in there. You could, it's
yes,
in
I
there,
see it
just
here.
a couple of, yes.
Sweet.
Okay, great. But it is
so
something that you offer, right, DeAndre? It's something that
yes,
the early bar prep.
yes, we do early
And do
bar
you
prep.
think you think it'll be good for me? It will help me, you know, when the time comes.
Absolutely. It's good for everybody because again, it's
Okay.
just like, let's not study in just 10 weeks. So typically what we
Right.
do, like if you're taking the July exam, we have a bar taker advantage course that starts in January and takes you from January to April, which is your ramp up. And then you get into your 10-week intensive. But if you're coming even earlier, yes, there's things that we can do. We can have you audit certain classes or bar prep sessions and be in more workshops like this and things like that.
Okay.
So we'll talk
Okay.
and we'll get
Perfect.
you on
'Cause
track. And yeah.
I think I learned more in this one session than I did in my entire Conlec class. So thank
Yeah.
you so much. Thank
You're
you.
so welcome. And then, by the way, we have law school resources as well, which I'll talk to you about it when you schedule that call so we can just get you, you know, fully legally fit. But we have stuff to then now help you while you're in school to help you while you're in those classes. So,
Okay, perfect.
yeah,
Thank you so much.
we'll chat
Okay.
soon. Okay. Thanks, Carol. Okay. Erica.
This is my last question. A quick
Mhm.
question. When the intensive classes start for February 2026?
For Feb 2026, it starts on December 8th is orientation and December 15th is day 1.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Of course. Lewis?
I just wanted to add for the takeaway. So as I'm now officially a repeat taker,
Mhm.
I think people they big up the bar and it is difficult. but one of the things that I appreciate with Legal Fit with you is that I thought the most difficult essay was the con law. And you kind of like, well, I just looked at it like an hour before we start the program. And then the way you broke it down, and I'm looking at my essay and I'm like, yo, I'm out here shoe shining and polishing. Like I'm throwing everything in the kitchen sink, trying to get this con law essay down. And you just stuck with the basic. You stuck with the basic. You stuck with what they asked. And it didn't need to be fancy. It didn't need to be crazy. And that's what it is. And I noticed that with your style and your approach. It's like, look, if you have your foundation, you have your law, you just got to trust your process. And, you know, I'm over here kicking myself in the foot because I'm like, man, I wrote all that crazy stuff and it doesn't even make sense now after we review the essay and how simple it was.
Yes.
So thank you. Thank you again. Thank you.
You're welcome, Lewis, man. And I appreciate your vulnerability. And again, thank you to the person who submitted theirs and doing that and sharing that. And yes, like the thing is that like, as everybody's bar coach, as the role that I play, Lewis, I try to play that role where it's just like you said, I'm not trying to make this harder or scarier than what it is. And there is challenges, but like I said, man, it's not that this is hard. It's just a lot of hard work. It's a lot of discipline, you know, like Lewis, like it's that discipline of like, all right, I got this con law essay. Like, all right, don't go off the, you know, the guardrails. Like it says due process. All right, which one is it? Procedural or substantive? Okay, it's substantive. What's my framework? Like that's all I do every time, Lewis. Like any essay you give me, we could pop up the next essay, the contracts one. All I'm gonna do is read the fact pattern based off of my history of doing so many questions, assess what is it triggering? Cool. What's my framework for that discussion? Fit in this analysis into that, right? And it's just repetition, repetition. So yeah, please keep that in mind because you know, a lot of times as lawyers to be, we get too, you know, smart for our own good. And we're just trying to like, you know, explain and talk our way through it and out of it where it's just like, no, like you said, it's just a matter of giving them what they're looking for, doing it well and getting out, you know, and keeping the ball rolling. So thanks for coming, Lewis. And thank you for all the participation today to help us do this session. All right, we got communities upwards. So you got your hand raised. Let me try to ask you to unmute.
Thank you for unmuting me because I wasn't able to do it myself.
No worries.
Yeah, I'm a foreign lawyer and I did California bar once, which is July. And I actually started studying like literally 19 days before the bar exam. And I haven't written any essays before I entered the bar exam. And I think I did well, but I think that the takeaway from here is just the practice, you know, because I missed by 35 points. Which is, I think, you know, I just practiced UBE questions and I just like went to the MEE like cold turkey, I just went there and did it, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, practice is the most important thing. And that's what I'm going to do. And I sent a message to Edna and I was asking her if we can be study buddies because I'm also over 50. I went back to law school after I, you know, raised my kids and I have 4 daughters, you know, and I did that. You see,
love it.
Yeah. So I'm now trying to do the thing for myself, you know, so
yeah, well, congratulations on, I mean, I think it's very impressive to be able to perform in that way with such little study time. And yes, I think if you put in the time, you find the study partner, right, to kind of help keep accountability and you put in that time to do that practice part is so key. And yeah, you're not alone, that there's a lot of people who either don't do any practice or do very little. And that is the exact opposite of my philosophy. It's that you should be doing a ton of practice, right? By the time you're getting to the cooking competition to cook your macaroni and cheese, you've made that macaroni and cheese 100 times before, right? There's no...
DeAndre, you ready for Thanksgiving?
Look, we're going to keep talking about that mac and cheese, ain't we?
I know, right? And the turkey and all that.
But no, so you know what I'm saying? Don't show up on Friendsgiving or Thanksgiving bringing that mac and cheese you made only one time, and now we're gonna have to talk about
it. Exactly.
But you get the analogy. That was a good one, Edna.
I'll put my email in the chat so you can see it. We can talk for sure.
Awesome. 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 All right, y'all. Well, yes, it's 7:45. I appreciate you guys. A lot of you guys are still in here. I love to see people, taking it serious, soaking up the information. I'm super glad to hear some of the initial feedback that you guys appreciated the session. And remember, like, this is step one. Step one is the clarity as to like what it takes. And again, that part is more or less straightforward. The difference maker is in that day-to-day when nobody else is there, when nobody else is looking. Are you doing the practice? Or when you're doing a practice essay, are you just looking at it and reading through it? Or are you actually writing it out? Are you comparing it to the sample answer? Are you internalizing what you missed? These are all the steps. We'll talk more about it in our future workshops. And tomorrow we have the multiple choice workshop. So we'll switch gears and talk about what it takes to be successful there. So I'll see you all tomorrow for the multiple choice workshop. You guys have a great night, and I'll see you soon.